Yeah, let's go ahead and redact that. Happy Thursday. How are you?
Happy Thursday to you as well. I'm doing all right. Doing all right. Can't complain. How are you doing?
Good. Both my kids are sick, but what are you gonna do?
I
They're,
hear you. I just got out of a couple bugs myself. I think it's just that time of year.
it's brutal. I appreciate you setting aside a few minutes. I feel like you've been doing some cool stuff, some interesting stuff, and I thought that you would be a good person to ask about this idea. We run in similar circles, but I had first got interested in what you are working on, or at least having a conversation about what's good and bad. And I loved your writing for that reason. It was taking stuff that actually impacted real human beings and had an impact.
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, I'm not too interested in redacting much. The only thing that I particularly care about is, I can stand behind what I say and my ideas, and I'm like super open to discuss and debate them. The only thing is I work in software. I work for a software company that's based out of like the greater Boston area. And like we know what happens when somebody, a tweet is dug up from like 2 decades ago or something like that, right? Not that Twitter was around that long, but like you get my point. So like that's it. I like, being able to pay my bills. So I'm only interested in redacting, the very least that I need to in order to kind of keep that going. But if I'm not readily identifiable, then I have no interest in censoring myself.
That's great. Well, maybe this will be a super easy editing job for me then. And that would also be pretty cool. Not to immediately jump on the one thing that you said is a risk to you, but at the same time, it strikes me as this really interesting situation where you are clearly outspoken. I enjoy that. As I said before, your writing is great, but what pays the bills puts you in a situation where you can't necessarily be yourself. How do you kind of work those two together between your ideals and the reality of what you have to do to put food on the table or whatever you do with your money at the end of the day?
It more or less boils down to I try to maintain a strong separation, I guess, between like my work life and every other aspect of my life. Like I'm not shy to talk about my politics or my beliefs or get into discussions with people that I believe will have good faith discussions with me, even if I know they take like almost entirely contrary stances. It boils down to I don't want anyone having something that they can bring to like HR and be like, oh, this guy, like, he wants to repeal the Civil Rights Act. He's a monster. It's a real shame because, like, the impression I've gotten in a lot of places I've worked and people I work with is that they might be more on like the kind of leftist, like, like neoliberal side of things, but even they recognize that this is just not right. But like, it's kind of a prisoner's dilemma, right? Like nobody wants to be the first nail that sticks their head out and then they get hammered, right? On the one hand, like I like to push that envelope just a little bit here and there where I can, but on the other hand, I'm kind of like I'm just looking to kind of bide my time and make a little bit of money until I can find something that I don't have to tiptoe and I don't have to do this with. Unfortunately, just a lot of the tech jobs, particularly the ones that like pay really good money, they're based out of Boston, New York, right? LA, Chicago, like these kinds of places. So you just kind of got to take the L sometimes. That being said, so I mentioned I work in Massachusetts. I have a license to carry in Massachusetts, and I carry my firearm to work. There's nothing in their building handbook or their employee handbook that prohibits me from doing so. And I mentioned it to my core team of people I work with, about 3, 4 people, and they were all okay with it. In fact, my managers, they work out on the West Coast a little bit, not right on the coast, but more out west, and they've like worked with the Libertarian Party and everything out there. So she was like, "Yeah, dude, I don't care if you carry a gun, like no problem, like I trust you."
It's nice that you can be open or at least your core team, even if you're dealing with this larger structure, you can have these frank, honest conversations and overcome, obviously if someone was on that team and they said, listen, I don't feel safer, I feel more at risk, you still have the opportunity to navigate that in a human, kind, compassionate way, hopefully to a resolution for both of you.
Yeah, they were all pretty okay with it. I'll be honest, I was surprised. I thought at least one of them was gonna like have a mild meltdown and be like, "What? Why? Like, why would you possibly want to do this?" Like, they were like, "No, I don't care." one of them actually he never like shot a gun before or even held one or anything, and he was like super interested. So like at some point later, like by my car, I very safely cleared it and handed it to him and let
Yep.
him kind of check it out. And I told him like if he ever wants to, he can come up and visit me here, and like I'll take him shooting. And he said he would love to do that. So I think I might have I might have won over. I like to subtly kind of show things to people in my workplace and elsewhere that they don't really get to see or they don't get exposed to. So like for example, I never like blatantly brought this up to anyone, but when I went out to lunch with a couple of coworkers when I first started working there, I whipped out my gold back wallet. So
Mm.
I had a credit card in there. I was like buying a sandwich or whatever, but there were also a bunch of gold backs peeking out. So one of my coworkers was like, "Hey, what the fuck is that?"
What are goldbacks?
Right. So for people who don't know, goldbacks are a privately minted gold foiled note. And they're almost like, think of a dollar bill or something, but it's made out of gold. So a single gold back is a thousandth of an ounce of gold. And then they have 1, 5, 10, 25, and 50 denominations in a handful of states. They're great because it's gold. One of the problems, if you want to consider it that way, of gold is it's so high value relative to dollars that if you want to just buy something small, you want to go to the grocery store, you want to buy some eggs from your buddy who has chickens, whatever, like what are you going to do? Like fleck off a flake of gold with your knife or something? Like you can't do that. So with a single gold back running at about $3, $4, $5, over the years, like you can have some pretty small transactions.
So you're definitely the type of person that I wanted to talk to about this idea. If you accept an idea, it seems like you're doing what you can to bring it into reality to make your life better. Off the top, I know I reached out to you and I said I'd love to chat with you about this moral principle of human respect. And I think your first question, if you don't mind me sharing this, is, hey, why the hell did you capitalize that thing? Is that an actual real phrase, or are you referencing something, or do you just love human respect and that's why you cancel? It was a great answer, and I'm very curious to get your thoughts. What do you think of this proposal that they're putting forward, that they have titled the moral principle of human respect?
Well, the first thing I want to point out is as I was checking out that screenshot you sent me, the first thing that came to mind was this is very spiritually, if not also just like linguistically reminiscent of the NAP, the non-aggression principle. I was certainly very intrigued. My interest was piqued as I was reading it. I think if you underpin respecting your fellow man and their sovereignty, read their property in all aspects of your life, perhaps it doesn't have it doesn't completely cover every single corner and edge case and nuance like in day-to-day life, but it's damn close. I think it's a pretty solid proxy even in the corner cases. Like there's so much philosophy on the matter, and Lord knows I have not even scratched the surface, but like the various problems that people experience in their day-to-day, whether it's say more of our leftist friends, they might feel like racism abounds, and things of that nature, prejudice, other people there have more economic woes, things of that nature. All of this, I think all of it kind of comes from a fundamental lack of respect for people, and to push a little further, kind of like I said earlier, and their property.
There's a rule that these folks put forward that says theft and violence always reduce happiness, harmony, and prosperity. Always. And I'm not just adding that second always, that's how they write it. They period after prosperity, always, period. And from discussions with them, they treat it as an absolute truth. They say it's as reliable as gravity. In other words, it's going to be true whether we agree with it or not. Do you think it's accurate to say that it's always true? Does initiating violence and theft always reduce a human being's happiness?
I'm glad you asked. And first, I just want to clarify one thing, just because my memory is failing me a little bit. Was the claim that violence and theft always reduce happiness, or is the claim that the initiation of violence and theft always reduce happiness?
So
It's a
I
small but very significant difference.
the way that they phrase it on the website is human happiness, harmony, and prosperity will always decrease as persons experience the initiation of violence or the theft of their property or time through force and fraud. So you're sticking that word in the right spot there, the initiation of violence.
That I can absolutely agree with. I'm pretty sure it was that language that kind of made me recall the NAP, right? Like, there is absolutely no reason that I can think of that somebody would need to initiate violence. Unfortunately, there are lots of situations where one might need to respond with violence to somebody else's initiation of it. There are a lot of things I think that constitute aggression that aren't necessarily violent, but they are almost certain to result in violence down the road. It's a bold claim, but I think for the most part, I agree with it.
To return to what you were talking about before, and I guess what you alluded to maybe about belief. I think there are a lot of people that say, no, I can make the world a better place by initiating violence. I can steal from a certain number of people, I can take from them, and I can improve the world. Do you have a response to those types of arguments?
Perhaps some of this is no more than my gut instinct, and I'm not afraid to admit that. But I think if you expand your time horizon long enough, the unnecessary initiation of violence will always come back to bite you. To play devil's advocate, like, okay, if I found, bad people, right? People that commit heinous crimes, people that commit theft, etc., and I were to say steal their money, right? And give it to people that I think are promoting noble causes, whether it's feeding the hungry, sheltering homeless, etc. You could make the argument that that increases those people's happiness, and it might be kind of a net benefit for society. But one, you've violated natural human rights, right? That I think that's important for a handful of reasons. There's the obvious reason on its face, right? Like that violating a natural human right should be considered unnatural, right? It's an aberration. And two, people who get their rights violated tend to seek some form of retribution. You might have seized a bunch of bad people's funds and used that to kind of develop your society or whatever, but these people are going to have a bone to pick with you, right? A lot of people, myself included, for a long time had this kind of idea in their head that bad people from the Middle East attacked us and all we did was respond in turn, right? Realistically, there has just been an ongoing chain of grievances that have just led to escalation and escalation. It's kind of like a Hatfield and McCoy situation, right? Like, you attack, they're going to have to respond. Of course, you're not going to take that sitting down, right? And you might find little pockets in between the violence where things are good, things are happy, but in the net, none of this needed to happen. And this has never directly bitten me in the ass, right? Like, I've never feared direct violence upon myself, but it's certainly manifested in other ways. Direct violence is a small but non-negligible possibility, right? But then there's economic issues, right? We clearly do not have good relations with a lot of these places as a result. And so we can't have free trade. We can't benefit each other by providing each other goods and services that we otherwise couldn't have for ourselves, right? So there's an opportunity cost as well that I think is completely neglected. We might, a lot of people around the world might feel like, yay, we beat the terrorists, hooray. But like, what about the untold and potentially unimaginable cooperation that could have existed between us, right? That's entirely hypothetical now. I could not possibly tell you what that would look like because we, at least for the near future, will not get to see that. We've taken those pawns completely off the board. When we work together, right, and we all, around the world, we have different opportunities, we have different resources that lend themselves to different forms of productivity and value creation, right? It could be something as trivial as now it's very hard for us to enjoy chocolate. Or it could be something far more meaningful, which is now we can't get all sorts of rare earth metals for our many electronics that we are completely dependent on for modern civilization.
I'll play devil's advocate. Rusty, you're saying some great things, but you're being an idealist. You're throwing out this perfect world scenario, And, as we sit here, military experts, international economic professionals, you can't possibly fathom. And as a result, we need to we need to make sure that our interests are protected. Do you buy that?
Not one bit. I have zero stake directly, in say our relations with various countries around the world. By that, I mean I'm not sitting on the board of some defense company. I'm not going to be enriched or impoverished as a result of good or bad relations, at least not directly. Of course, as a citizen, just a person who lives in the world, there's all sorts of indirect effects that do affect me. Um, but just to kind of sum it up, like I don't have direct skin in the game. Generally speaking, of course, I like to listen to people who know more about me about things, but I reject the concept of you should just listen, blindly to the experts on something simply because they've been deemed such. We're all human, we're all fallible, we can all make mistakes, we're all susceptible to corruption. So even a very well-intentioned person can make mistakes, and very, very intelligent people can be corrupted.
In many ways, what I feel like you're talking about is fear. When things are uncertain, looking to an external set of rules or someone who's willing to take responsibility becomes very tempting, especially to those who are experiencing any number of pressures, whether, emotional distress, a lack of resources, simply feeling like they're not strong enough to fend for themselves. What do we do with that divide between those who are willing to say, yes, please take care of me, and those who say, there are clear guardrails on what should and shouldn't be done? Is it necessary for that latter group to compromise?
That's a very interesting question. I think just to zoom out a hair here, I think one of my favorite aspects of libertarianism, voluntarism, whatever you want to call it, is that you can do whatever you want to do. You can organize your life, your social structures, etc., however you like, simply without the state involved. Right. So as a libertarian, I even have some anarchist tendencies. Like I very much do not like the state. I think it has an abysmal performance record. Not that I believe it's trying to perform, but that's neither here nor there right now.
Could you, just before you go on, could you define the state for us? Are you talking about any form of governance at all, or just currently what's going on? Like, what specifically do you take issue with there?
Any form of involuntary governance, right? Any body of governance where I do not have the ability to withdraw myself from or reject and will ultimately, visit me with violence as a result, right? And that applies to pretty much all of the governments that we know within our country, right? The federal government, the state governments, local governments, right? Stop paying taxes for a few months, see what happens to you, right? Like as simple as that, don't pay some arbitrary fees or whatever. Like you're gonna end up in a cage if you're lucky, if you're lucky. So I would consider that a form of violence, right? I have absolutely no way to withdraw from that. I literally could not go live off grid in the woods on land that I bought without somebody looking to, seek some money from me for absolutely nothing.
That's 100% accurate. Do you mind if we just switch the angle here a little bit, um,
Not at all.
and talk about happiness? Because I mean, obviously, there is this whole part of the moral principle of human respect, which is talking about violence and the theft, fraud, the destruction of people's property. But there's this other side, which is we have to talk about those things because they're current realities. But the end goal is so much more interesting, in my opinion. Happiness, harmony, prosperity. I mean, they're similar, I guess, to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. They're alluding to something that goes beyond words. What Rusty's version of happiness is and what Connor's version of happiness is are likely different. But I'm curious, and obviously, I said at the beginning, we can redact as much of this as you want, and even if it's just a thought experiment, and you don't have to say a word, that's fine. But I'm curious to ask the question: how do you experience happiness?
Very good question. Very good question. this is going to be a little wishy-washy, but bear with me here. I suspect that most people know themselves and what they want, what their desires are, what their goals and ambitions are, more than anyone else does, right? I know what I want out of my life. I know what makes me happy, as kind of abstracted as I've left it right now, more than my family does, more than my best friends in life do. And they might have a pretty good idea, but at the end of the day, nobody knows that better than I do. And therefore, nobody is more suited to pursue that for myself than I am. Right. And so the safeguards, the safety nets, the regulations, etc., put in place by states, right, and their associated entities, those are only obstacles potentially in my path, right? So people need money, right, to put food on their table. People need money to seek certain things that they want to enhance their lives. For example, I would love to live off grid somewhere in the woods. I need money to do that, especially here. The land is so expensive, I'm not complaining. I make pretty good money for myself. I'm blessed. There are a lot of people who are less fortunate than myself, but I got to tell you, 5 years ago, if I made the money that I make now 5 years ago in 2019, I would have been like, wow, I made it. Like, I'm good. I'm set. As it is now, I'm doing all right for myself. Like I said, I can't complain. I got to be thankful. But just in 5 short years, the direct effects, of the government claiming to try to help me have only done me harm. And again, it really doesn't matter too much whether they've intentionally done so or whether it's the result of incompetence, right? They've prevented me from doing so. And, one of the interesting things, I'm circling back just a little bit here, that I like about libertarianism is that, let's say for a moment that I feel like I don't know what's going to make me happy. I by nature am a more submissive person, or I'm more trusting of others around me. I feel like other people really do have my best interests in heart, and they're more competent and more capable of delivering me happiness, right? Okay, no problem. I think I should be able to voluntarily choose to enter some agreement with them, whereas they run my life, or aspects of it for me. And an example of this is, I forget what they're called, but I was reading something short the other day about how some completely voluntary group in Germany has basically run their own opt-in universal basic income program, whereas a bunch of people, they pay in, and of course, people that have more opt to pay more, right? And then everybody receives like some kind of uniform payment. That is something that a lot of state governments, have been interested in doing. But with the real catch here, it's small, but again, very significant, is it's entirely opt-in. I can't stop paying Social Security or I'm going to jail. In fact, the system has been rigged so that I couldn't choose to stop paying Social Security even if I wanted to. They take it out of my paycheck before it ever makes it to me, right? But even if I had that ability, like, go ahead, stop paying Social Security, see what happens to you. These folks, perhaps for some point of their lives, this is a worthwhile thing and it's really the best for them. But at any time, if things change, their priorities change, just the landscape, kind of politically, socially, culturally, whatever changes, they can opt out and nothing bad is going to happen to them as a direct result of that. They can opt back in later or not. It doesn't matter, and this is one thing that I see is like, it's truly the best of both worlds, right? There is absolutely no reason why we cannot replace almost every single state program right now with a voluntary equivalent that achieves, or at least intends to achieve, the same functions stated, right? We can still have schools that are voluntary. Don't send your kid to school there. Okay, don't pay. Everything's fine. That being said, I do believe that there are, some bad actors who acknowledge certain economic realities that if certain, and if enough people or certain groups of people were to opt out, there would not be enough of the pie where they get a slice that's big enough for them and their appetites. And I think a lot of people knowingly or unknowingly rely on that to extort others into paying for them.
Right. Agency delegation, the idea that, maybe you're not morally culpable if there's someone else that's actually pulling the trigger against someone else, or, to put it in the framing of the principle of human respect. If someone else is diminishing the wealth of others, yeah, I'm just the guy raking in the check at the end of it. You bring up something interesting about, the placement of these ideas and whether or not they lead to each other, right? You mentioned libertarianism having these features, and the principle of human respect, I think, kind of falls in the same place. And it's interesting that the foundation has tried to position it as this reliable as gravity, absolute truth, but upstream of it seems to still be consent and the idea of opting in, right? I mean, I don't think that the principle makes any claim of the ability to force someone to believe something, or to live a particular way. It more seems to similar to libertarianism, or I'd argue capitalism as well. It's kind of the key that opens the door to you being the best version of yourself. I also just want to clarify, we were talking about what government does, and it's just people. Like there's no their government is nothing but human beings. There's no independent collective that exists without human beings doing these things, which I don't think it excuses the behavior of violence or theft or fraud or destruction of property just because you're wearing a legislator's pin or a badge at the end of the day.
Yeah,
Well,
government is a mega corporation with a monopoly on violence. A lot of people bring up the notion of a social contract. I would love for somebody to print one out for me, send me a PDF, show me where I ever signed something like that.
yeah, I
Spoiler
need my
alert,
lawyer to
it
take a
never
look at
happened.
that thing. That's good. Yeah, I need to check some of that fine print before I sign. It's interesting, and I got to challenge you on some stuff here, right? You've got good ideas, but I want to challenge you on some of your ideas. I went through your Twitter. You recently suggested that Bernie Sanders dying of COVID might be a good thing. That protesters getting hit by cars could be a good thing. What's the underlying principle there?
Right. So just, as a disclaimer, I am a shit poster. I am a serial shit poster
Okay.
on Twitter, which is
Well,
not to
yeah,
say.
maybe that's something that needs definition as well, because I feel like there's so many different brands of, what posting do to move your uh ideals forward.
I think, as a libertarian, as a capitalist, as a voluntarist, I'm certainly in a minority, in the country, in the world, etc. Um, and I myself am simply barraged with propaganda and demoralization all of the time. So every now and then, I like to throw a little bit back the other way. It's my form of resistance that I don't believe hurts anyone. Because I don't believe words are violence. Like, in the case of Bernie, I don't remember the exact language of my tweet. I don't know if you happen to have it pulled up or not. That's me basically making the claim that Bernie, being the massive socialist that he wants, his mission in life has been to get his hands on my money and your money and everyone else's money that he can, without producing a single thing. What thing of value has Bernie Sanders ever contributed to the world? So it's not like I'm necessarily wishing death upon him. I am just making a tongue-in-cheek, little bit kind of, a little bold observation that he's contributed absolutely nothing to the world. And in fact, he's made his entire existence about taking things that I produce, right? And other, people in the community valuably produce. So
Yeah, it
remind me,
seems
what was
like
the other thing
COVID
you said?
COVID seemed like it was doing the heavy lifting there on threatening Bernie's life. So definitely not an indication that you were personally seeking out Bernie for any retribution, just that you were very comfortable to sit there and let nature take its toll. I think you said this would be, 2023, you still have a chance to end strong, or something to that effect. Um, I
Yeah,
guess,
I think it's not a bad thing to dance on the graves of horrible people. And I do consider Bernie to be a horrible person. I don't think he's misguided. I think he knows exactly what he's doing. And I think he's mastered his own brand of grift. You know, truly, I think he's like a very high order thief. You got some thieves who break into people's houses and take TVs or whatever. And then you have Bernie level thieves who managed to, put their hands in the coffers of a whole generation or multiple generations of people. I cannot abide by that. And I am not, shy to hide that. I certainly have zero respect for the man. I wish no harm on him, but I'm not going to shed a tear if anything were to happen.
That's the article that I want to read from you, Rusty. That's the one. Dancing on the Graves, a compassionate approach. That's it. There is even in that, and I think that's one of the things that comes through in your writing and your approach to this is even when you're talking about something that's dark, right? I mean, this is maybe the flavor of your posting that gives it that feel that is unique, is there seems to still be this element of truth and optimism in it about the nature of a better world. And just real briefly before I get to my question, do you have kids?
I do not have kids. Not
No,
yet,
no,
at least.
okay, okay. But I ask because it was a genuine question because you do seem to be thinking about future generations. You seem to be thinking far beyond, libertarians, capitalists, believers in the principle of human respect, I think generally can be shuffled into this collective, ironically, of those who are self-serving or selfish or do not think of others. But in a lot of your work, in your writing, in your posting, there is this beautiful view of, have you guys considered that there is a brighter future? We're getting to the end of the time that we agreed to, and maybe if could you leave us with some optimism about truth, about looking forward? What do you want people to know?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to try and spiritually borrow from Javier Milei, the newly elected president of Argentina, without, quoting or paraphrasing him. That is to say, I believe people like us, people like myself, whether you want to call them libertarians, voluntarists, capitalists, any combination thereof, these are the people that produce. These are the people that create. These are the people that add value to people's lives, right? To put it bluntly, we are the innovators, we are the creatives, right? We are the people that have ambitious goals and the drive to achieve them. Bureaucrats, governments, etc., for all of their power, right, which they've amassed over the years, and by amassed I mean stolen, right, from you and I, the people, for all of their power, they're truly weak, they are cowardly, and they are stupid. People that are multi-term senators, congress people, other political leaders, etc., they wouldn't be bagging groceries. If they did not carve out this niche for themselves, they would amount to nothing, right? So in the grand scheme of things, I truly think as, time marches on, they're going to lose. Now, if the tide changes and we're able to wrest back some of that power for ourselves, and I think we can, and I hope that we will, we can stave off a lot of potentially very grim things that will happen. But in any case, we are the ones that have the will, the motivation, and the ability to fight back. It's inevitable.
I agree with a lot of that. Happiness, harmony, and prosperity, in my opinion, are inevitable. They're coming. That's what human beings move toward. It's our natural desire. It's our natural state. And the only way we can mess it up is if we initiate violence, if we steal from others, if we destroy their property. We're not gonna lift people up by tearing some other people down.
Exactly. And if we do those things, if we do initiate violence and steal from people, we deserve whatever happens to us because we've lost the plot.
I think that's a good place to end it. Do you want people to follow you somewhere?
If you want to follow me on Twitter at the_anarchimist, ANARCHEMIST, certainly love to have followers. You'll see a range of, kind of thoughts off the dome, eloquent dissertations, and of course, tons of posting and memes.
Perfect. Well, we'll look forward to it. Thank you for taking the time. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.